My closing remarks. My son, you surely have made questions about my strategy in the seemingly momentous economic and political crises that are shaking national and international affairs. You and I will begin handling them in detail shortly. For tonight, let me be brief. Most of the current national upheavals are staged, managed to consolidate our monopoly position in government and business against the continual nuisance of economically competent but politically naive competitors. Likewise, most international crises are managed to exert pressure on our obscures, reluctant puppet dictators in underdeveloped areas. These events are fairly easy to manage. I expect to place such management in your hands as soon as possible. The real challenge lies in dealing with my international peers. These are the real crises since they are crises of my power structure, not just of my subject populations and puppets. In the vast chess game with my peers there are no rules and no proven tactic. Mutual vulnerability alone limits the conflict. My peers and I have labored for decades to erect a world government and banking system under which we could all share finance capitalism millennium without the nightmare of internecine warfare. With the advent of nuclear war, a new world order seemed particularly desirable. I say ostensibly we have labored for world government because none of us are sure that others will ever voluntarily surrender sovereignty to the group. The schedule set after the last World War has not been met. So far, the world government idea has served mainly to enthuse collectivist intellectuals, and secondarily to veil each finance capitalist maneuvers for supremacy for the rest. The future course of finance capitalism is difficult to predict. Our empires are too fragile to risk all-out battles for supremacy among ourselves. Our, our power would dissipate to second echelon wealthy during the struggle. Yet we continue to chip away at rival empires on the premise that offense is the best defense. On the other hand, purely political leaders are helpless before our money power. When Caesars arise, they are of our making. Perhaps our system will simply remain much as it is, secure on the national level and disturbingly pluralistic at the international level, until reason and egoism has developed among our populations to such an extent that our occult technology of money power becomes obvious to all who think and must yield to either anarchy or a more advanced form of deception. Afterwards by the transcriber. Quote, the names of some of these banking families are familiar to all of us and should be more so. They include Baring, Lazard, Erlanger, Warburg, Schroeder, Singelman, the Spears, Mirabaud, Mallet, Fouad, and above all, Rothschild and Morgan. End quote. Dr. Carroll Quigley, Tragedy and Hope. Any resemblance of these characters to persons living or dead is purely coincidental. Any resemblance of their methodology to that of real ruling elites is purely intentional. The extent to which I represent or exaggerate the self-conscious, intentional power technology of real political economic rulers and their unity is for the reader to decide after studying available empirical evidence. I am providing a bibliography of relevant historical works to aid the curious reader. I have included no works written from spurious pluralistic suppositions. No one seems to consider pluralism as a proposition requiring evidence since they are flooding the market. Unfortunately, many works listed affirm that ideas rather than individual struggles for wealth and power propel history. That is, they view the elitists they're observing ruling the world as ideologically motivated. Thus, we have the spectacle of the right claiming the major finance capitalists such as the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds are communists, conspirators, or socialists. On the other hand, we see the left claiming that the same people are bent on imposing laissez-faire capitalism, or in a slightly more realistic vein, are fanatical proponents of fascism. Virulent white racism is another ideological foolishly ascribed to the ruling class by the left. This opinion is nicely balanced by the charge from the right that the elite want to marginalize and thus submerge the white race. As usual, the elite, completely free of prejudice, supports both sides of this battle for its own ends. As should be clear by now, I believe that finance capitalists, Ferdinand Ludwig has dubbed them finpoles or financial politicians, are understandably attempting to make their power as extensive as possible without incurring the severe risks which plague purpoles, public politicians. It seems that only the most daring finpoles are willing to take on the additional risk of purpoledom, perhaps only because they are denied the reins to the family fortune by more privileged relatives. Pub bowls lose their privacy and thus their rights to sexual impropriety in addition to incurring vulnerability to electioneering, and worse in democratic countries. In most areas of the world, the lot of the purples is even worse. Purge, assassination, and armed coup are regular events. While totalitarianism of right or left at home eliminates the shield of secure private property desired by finpoles, laissez-faire is likewise rejected out of hand as hell on earth by enlightened power seekers. Egoism, mitigated only by the reality of circumstance, is the motive to realistically attribute to healthy elites. An elite under the spell of mental spooks could not hold sway for long. Although finpole statism is increasingly a crisis for its victims, there is yet no evidence that the elite itself is a serious crisis. Even inflation, the current crisis for the powerless, is simply another crisis to be managed towards the ends of consolidating, extending, and refreshing elite power. No doubt the depression with which inevitably followed will be managed to even better effect at the expense of the masses. I have classified the bibliography into the categories right and left. In each list I begin with the most objective works and proceed to the works most infected with the mental spooks and emotional hysteria. These books should be read for empirical data, not theoretical insight. A list of less ideological biased works is provided as well. I quote the recommended authors not to imply support for my scenario where there is none, but to credit a few of those who have provided grist for my thoughts. And here is a list of the bibliography. Quote, we are much beholden to Machiavelli and others that write what men do and not what they ought to do. End quote. Francis Bacon. I will not mention all of these, but I will go slow and you can pause and write down any books that you would like to check out. And you can go to our bookstore at hinfinancial1.com. Some of these titles you might be able to find in the same format as this writing on our website as well, or on our YouTube page at HIN Financial One. And this concludes Occult Technology of Power.